President, turning to item number 3 on the agenda, 6 ordinances, styled 3A through F. This is the project known as the Lincoln Yards. Rather than read what the development is, I perhaps would defer to Alderman Hopkins, who has been explaining this ad infinitum for the last several months, and perhaps he could do that, and then it'll allow you folks not to hear the same thing twice. Mr. President, I would defer to Alderman Hopkins for a description of the item rather than go through the description 2 times.
Alderman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I would also ask for the right to close in the event that there's other questions or commentary. Very similar to the previous item, the change that is represented today is an increase in the MWB and minority participation rate. For women-owned businesses, it moves from 6% to 10%. For minority-owned businesses, it moves from 26% to 30%. That doesn't sound like a significant jump, but actually, in dollar amounts, it is quite a significant jump. It will be an infusion of cash, jobs, and business to the minority-owned and women-owned business community in the city of Chicago. And I think it's important to stress that this is not a goal. This is a mandate. And there are mechanisms baked into this arrangement now to ensure that these targets will be met. We're not going to accept excuses. We're not going to accept we tried, we thought we could do it, we couldn't do it. We're going to do it. That's a significant change from what we've seen in the past in projects of this nature. This is a win for the city of Chicago. It's a win for the business community. And this was an easy change to agree to, even at the last hour that we did. So if there's any other comments or questions, I would yield the floor now and, Mr. President, ask for the right to close.
Alderman David Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. As everyone knows, there's been a lot of controversy around this issue, and nobody more than me from the start was concerned, and I'm sure there were others. And so as we began to just continue to vet, one thing I liked is this administration, under the leadership of Senior Counsel Shelley Burke, she constantly got us involved and asked in our communities what's in it for African Americans, what's in it for black people in our communities. And so as I talked with her, as I prodded her, as I pushed, as I worked with the leadership, not only in the mayor's office, but on this team, it was to a point that I felt comfortable that we're going to have things to point to in our communities by making this development happen. The other thing, what I found interesting, is that the number of phone calls that I got from not only African-American contractors, African-American workers, African-American insurance companies, and people who will get those professional services as well, that were African-Americans saying, stand up and support this. I had never in my life had all of them, including the activists, who would knock down my door, threaten to shut projects down, all of them together on the same page saying, we are going to benefit from this. That makes it difficult when I scream and ask for jobs for these returning citizens and for people who are building their construction companies and trying to grow these construction companies. For me to turn around and say no to them will be a slap in the face. And and that's what's in it for the black folk, because those are those black contractors. And so at the end of the day, I know that this is a good opportunity. I want to thank again Sterling Bay, specifically Shelley Burke, and definitely continue to keep her out in front on this initiative as we make sure that not only we have contractors that are working, but we have the developers themselves growing out of this deal. So I fully support this deal. Thank you.
Alderman Marino? Alderman Joe? No? Okay. Anybody? Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. The debate over how to responsibly use taxpayer dollars has put a spotlight on our process, our traditions, and our priorities in City Council. Many believe it is wrong to tie up billions of dollars, of public dollars, in a single project for decades when we have a financial reckoning ahead. And there is the lingering issue of what public benefit this project provides. It is supposedly A TIF is supposed to provide a public benefit, but it is lacking in the Lincoln Yards development. And we have yet to see who will pay for the schools, the libraries, and the policemen this mega development will require. And it will remain to be seen whether or not much needed and permanent public ownership of park space can be achieved at this site. Like so many, I am heartened by the results of the election and believe that we must, as an institution, heed the call for real change in our government. Our city is bigger than one project, our future is more complex than one vote, and our mayor-elect is keenly aware of the many challenges that lie ahead. And I'm encouraged by her pledge to continue working to ensure Lincoln Yards ultimately will become a better deal for taxpayers. I believe it can, and it will become better, and I believe we are on the brink of historic change. So to the thousands of citizens across Chicago who oppose these projects in their current form, I say do not be discouraged. Your voices will echo beyond today. Stay engaged, stay focused, and be proud of your efforts. The work to make our government better and our decisions wiser goes on. I will be voting no. Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I've spoken out in favor of Lincoln Yards numerous times because it puts people on the southwest side to work. But that's not the discussion we're going to have today, and that's not the topic I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the unprecedented amount of lies and deception that have gone on as it relates to the theft of billions from our neighborhoods. We have heard countless times, over and over and over, you're stealing money from our children, you're stealing money from our kids. We cannot steal what doesn't even exist yet. And that is a fact that is lost on many. And that has been a mantra that has been repeated time and time again. The money, the public benefit, all of those are going to an area that is being developed, a new neighborhood that will be brought into existence, 2 new neighborhoods, in fact, with this previous item as well. Who will pay for it? The police and the schools, the thousands of new homes that are now going to be providing property taxes to relieve the tax burden on the other 77 neighborhoods in the city. That is what we should be fighting for. That's what we should be applauding. Because when all of those new units start paying taxes, then we can start addressing the pension issue. Then we can start addressing how to fully fund and get more money into schools without burdening everyone else that lives in the city of Chicago. We are creating new pins that provide new dollars for everything that everyone wants us to put resources for. That's what this is about. That is what we're doing. We're leveling the economic playing field so that communities that already pay can shoulder the burden with their new community partners. Tens of thousands of new homes that are going to be providing taxes. Tens of thousands of new employees that are going to be spending in communities. That's the truth behind this matter. And the fact of the matter is that we continue to try and fall for these lies is despicable. That certain groups and special interests keep lying to our people to try and divide them and say this is a racial issue, that you're stealing from neighborhoods like Back of the Yard, you're stealing from Englewood, you're stealing from everywhere, is completely and patently false. It is despicable. And that is not how this body should operate. That's not how our partners should operate. And I give a word of caution to everyone coming here in a month. That kind of divisive rhetoric, simply to try and make a point, should not be acceptable to anybody. It's absolutely abhorrent to me and will be called out every time for what it is. Garbage. This is a good deal for people all throughout the city of Chicago, based on fact, that you are not stealing, you are generating. And in order to generate, you must build. And building is what this allows us to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman Hopkins to close. Oh, Alderman, hold on, Alderman. Alderman Waggis back. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be short because I know you want to get this thing passed and get out of here. We've talked a lot about transparency and the lack of it in this deal. The lack of accountability, receiving a 600-page RDA amended just a couple days ago, and reading through that RDA and seeing more issues that have cropped up that don't benefit taxpayers but do benefit the developer. And that's fine if we're working to make sure that at some point in the future, the TIF, which lasts 23 years, does put that money back in the system, and it does. We have to wait 23 years, guys. 23 years before we'll see property taxes flowing in from the fleet facility that was sold last year. That property is still assessed at 0. That's just one point out of many that community folks in that area, in Lincoln Park, Bucktown, who reviewed this document, who from day one when we started working on the framework, as we looked at dissolving the PMD, said, here are the things that we want in this area. They weren't saying suck all the money into Lincoln Park and Bucktown. They were saying spread the wealth. They were saying let's not suck all this money into a TIF for the next 23 years. Let's spread it around the city. If you were at those meetings, you would have heard the same thing. The people in that community, both of those communities, were thinking about the city as a whole. They have been throughout this whole process. So it hasn't been lies, it hasn't been deception that's coming from the community. It's been lies and deception that's been built into this project from day one. There are a lot of documents out there that we were never able to get a hold of. And I hope that with the mandate that we have with the new mayor, that changes, that it changes the way this council approaches governing. That's the inherent problem that we have here. We don't listen to the community. George Blakemore stood up there today and said a few good words about what our job is in the future. We need to take that seriously. And I take offense to when some alderman says we don't know what we're talking about in our own community. A TIF is for 23 years, period. We'll watch and see where that money flows back in, but half of us are going to be long gone from this council by the time we see those funds. I just want to make sure that everybody understands we have an opportunity to go back, though, as the new council comes in, look at these, make sure that we continue to work on the deals that have been cut and make them better for taxpayers. Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman Hopkins, to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're about to embark on a roll call vote that, for me, is the culmination of a journey that began actually before I became elected alderman in the city of Chicago. As a candidate for this office, knowing that the ward I was running in contained the industrial area that is now slated to become Lincoln Yards, and knowing that most of those industrial jobs had either left that area or were in the process of leaving that area, we were going to be faced with the challenge we have now. Acres of unused, in many cases environmentally contaminated land that we need to do something different with. And I took a position as a candidate that the appropriate use of that land was a mixed-use development. As our city grows and as our economy grows and as we move forward as a community, we need to think bigger, we need to think bolder, and we couldn't be constrained by the planned manufacturing district zoning requirement that had frankly worked very well for a number of years. It did its job. It got us to where we are today, but it was no longer appropriate for the future. And that wasn't a decision that I made. That wasn't a decision anyone in this body made. That was a decision that was made by the economics of the situation, made by the companies themselves who, for whatever reason, decided that they didn't want to continue to operate at that location. Many of them moved to your ward, Alderman Garza. Some of them left the country. Some of them ceased operations. But they all decided of their own volition that they did not want to continue operating on the land that is now slated to become Lincoln Yards. That raises the question, what is it going to be? We're going to answer that question today. And the reason that we're going to answer that question in the affirmative has nothing to do with me as the alderman of that ward. In all of my discussions with the people in this body who are going to vote yes on this project today, not once did I ask you, please vote for this because it's in the 2nd Ward and I'm the 2nd Ward alderman. That was not persuasive, and I didn't even try to go there. What is persuasive about this project is the merits of it for the people of the city of Chicago, the community benefits, the things that it's going to bring to us as a city. That's why you're supporting it today. That's why you're standing with me today. It's the right thing to do for the city. And that falls into 3 categories. It's the right thing to do because of the jobs and the economic development that we've talked about. because of the public infrastructure benefits that it will provide for the neighborhood that it needs it so desperately, and because of the affordable housing that it'll bring to the city. And I want to touch on those briefly, starting with the last one, affordable housing. In 2007, this body passed the ARO ordinance. Some of you were here, some of you weren't. But we all know the ramifications of it, and we all know the goal of affordable housing development. Since that time to today, the number of affordable housing units that have been developed under the ARO are 837 affordable housing units since 2007. This vote today, in one fell swoop, is more than doubling that. We are building 900 affordable housing units because of Lincoln Yards, 600 on site and 300 in the nearby area. We're more than doubling the work that it took us 12 years to do up until this point because of one development. That is why you're voting yes, many of you. It's the right thing to do. You're also voting yes because of the public infrastructure benefits that we're going to see, the new 11-acre park, the 3 bridges over the Chicago River, the new metro station, the improvements on the roads, the untangling of the notorious Armitage-Elston-Ashland intersection. All of those things we need today. All of those things are necessary right now. We have no other way to pay for them without Lincoln Yards. People talk about this as a subsidy to the developer. It's actually the opposite. The opposite is true. Lincoln Yards developers are bringing almost $300 million of their own private capital to pay for those infrastructure improvements. Our piece of that on the TIF is $490 million of tax money that is going to pay for things that tax money usually pays for. Tax money pays for all the bridges over the Chicago River in the city of Chicago. It pays for all the roads. That's what tax money is for. It's making this development possible, and this development will subsidize the city of Chicago. On the jobs and economic development piece, we talked earlier about the minority and women business participation level at 30% and at 10%. That's the right thing to do for the city, and that's one of the reasons that Mayor Lightfoot issued her statement that you saw. That was something that she successfully negotiated, and I tip my hat to her to come in at the 11th hour and have a conversation with Mayor Emanuel and with the developers and make an agreement that frankly is unprecedented in the city. We've never seen those types of levels agreed to, not as a target, but as a mandate. We set a precedent today. 24,000 permanent corporate jobs that will come to the city of Chicago because of this, and 10,000 union construction jobs that will last at least 10 years and put our people to work as we build this contaminated, toxic wasteland into the city of the future. It's the right thing to do for the city of Chicago. The benefits will accrue to all of us for generations to come. We will enjoy those benefits 23 years from now. There's no question about that. We're going to see some TIFs expiring in the next couple of years that people 20 years ago had the vision to form. And we're going to thank those people who formed those TIFs 20 plus years ago. People will thank us 20 plus years ago, or 20 years into the future, for the decision that we're making today. It benefits our city, and it brings about the reality that we've all talked about: more jobs, more economic benefit, more affordable housing. It's the right thing to do, and I thank you in advance for your aye vote.
Thank you. Alderman O'Connor to close.
Thank you,
Or
Mr.
rather,
President.
to proceed.
I just want to make 2 points. What we've done at O'Hare is going to allow men and women who work in the trades and the construction industry to work the majority of their working life at that location, remodeling that airport. What we're doing now is passing a project that will allow men and women in the construction industry to work at least 25 years of their working life at a location, helping to bring benefits to the city of Chicago. And that's the temporary job. The permanent jobs come as the development comes on, and the permanent jobs number for this site in excess of 25,000. This is a pretty good deal for the city of Chicago, no matter how you slice it, because it's not all people that live in that area that are going to be working there, not during the construction and not during the time that that project is finished. And so I want to congratulate Alderman Hopkins for his work in bringing it to this point. I want to congratulate the mayor's office for its willingness to work with the mayor-elect to ensure that we paid the respect that was appropriate to an incoming mayor. And I think that, in the end, the citizens of Chicago will benefit by this, and I move this matter by a roll call vote.
Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Alderman Moreno.
No.
Alderman Moreno. Alderman Hopkins. Alderman Dow. Alderman King. Alderman Hairston. Alderman Sawyer. Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Harris. Alderman Beal. Alderman Slawski Garza. Alderman Thompson. Alderman Cardenas. Alderman Quinn. Alderman Lopez. Alderman Folks. Alderman David Moore. Alderman Curtis. Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Brookins. Alderman Munoz. Alderman Tabarras. Alderman Scott. Alderman Solis. Alderman Maldonado. Alderman Burnett. Alderman Irvin. Alderman Talaferro. Alderman Raboyes. Alderman Santiago. Alderman Wagaspack. Alderman Mel. Alderman Austin. Alderman Ramirez Rosa. Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz. Alderman Sposado. Alderman Lorino. Alderman O'Connor. Alderman Napolitano. Alderman Riley. Alderman Smith. Alderman Tunney. Alderman Arena. Alderman Kappelman. Alderman Pawar. Alderman Osterman. Alderman Joe Moore. Alderman Silverstein.
Ayes are 32, the nays are 13. Alderman Beal.
Mr. President, motion to reconsider the vote.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say no. Motion failed. Alderman O'Connor, before you speak, I'd like to put all of the last three votes in context of where we are as a city. And the most important thing to me is whether you take the one in the 10th Ward, the one in the 25th, and the one in the 2nd, and beyond. 11 years ago, we set out, rather 8 years ago, in 2011, we set out to make Chicago a city where you can create jobs, whether they're manufacturing, industrial jobs, construction jobs, office jobs, across the city of Chicago. Every one of these investments will last the same amount of time. Every one of them will pay dividends beyond the boundaries of the physical space, whether that is in affordable housing, open space, whether that will be improvements along the river that will go beyond this area, whether that will be for neighborhood opportunity funds that will be resources for small businesses on the south and west side, whether in fact in this area there will also be an unprecedented investment in our industrial zones that will complement the investment we just made in the facility at North Point in the greater Hegwish community. Every one of the steps we've taken over the 8 years has allowed Chicago to be the #1 city for direct foreign investment in the United States for 6 consecutive years, and last year #5 in the world, and the #1 city for corporate relocations. Today we have the lowest unemployment on record and the highest employment. These are investments in the future that are not bound by the boundary of the space. They actually will pay dividends throughout the city of Chicago, and that reason is because of the changes we collectively made over the last couple of years to make sure that we made an investment. The benefits were not restricted, but actually gone across the city of Chicago in different efforts. That's how you advance affordable housing. That's how you advance small neighborhood businesses. That is how you advance the ecological and environmental quality of the river, which is the Friends of the Chicago River were the first group to endorse both of these projects. We have had a long process of 3 years, multiple meetings, iterations and changes. That is a good thing that happened, and it is not done. There will be incredible improvements and changes along the way. Your voices, others will be heard, and there'll be greater accountability to meet the goals that we set out collectively. I know this has been a long debate, but I'd like to put this in the context that every one of the sites, like the post office, have been empty for years, decades, sometimes as at least to 78, almost a century. And if we want to solve the problems of putting more kids, like we saw earlier, into after-school and summer jobs and mentoring programs, we want to invest in more activities and more goals for our city, whether those affordable housing, more industrial jobs so people of all walks of life have an opportunity to make a good living. You cannot do that without growing. And growing the economy has been the fundamental North Star of our city, beyond my tenure, for all of us. We had a good debate, a solid debate that is a complement to the democratic process. That process is not over. There will be places along the way, as the Alderman noted, to actually make that contribution. But if you step back and look at this, when you put all three of these projects together, they are the equivalent of another whole hair investment, another midway investment, and also another red-purple modernization. That's an incredible statement that in the worst of times, we will also have investments that will create the best of times for the city of Chicago. I know there's a lot of hard feelings, there's a lot of strong feelings, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, we've had that debate, it's time to move forward and shape a single future for the children that were just here, and then make sure they have a city that continues to be open for business and welcomes investments and opportunities for that future. Congratulations to everybody that participated, regardless of the vote that they took to making this day happen. Alderman O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to address just one thing with leave of the body. The idea of the designation of the property still being city-owned. I'm confident, based on the testimony we had this morning, that the purchasers of that property had sent a letter to the assessor and the treasurer's office to indicate that the property was now owned privately, to ensure that, and I'm confident that Assessor Kagi and his team would be aware of that and would correct it. But for the members of the body, I intend, as the chairman who sat during the meeting, to send a letter to the assessor's office to ensure that he takes care of the issue that Alderman Wagsback brought out. Now, turning to item number 4 on the agenda, it is a Class L real estate tax incentive classification for the property located at 111 North State Street for Macy's Retail Holdings, Inc. and BSREP 2SS Chicago LLC. This ordinance deals with Macy's at 111 North State Street. The ordinance asserts that the real estate tax incentive provided by Class L is